But we need to start off, if we're asking guys to man up, we need to understand what a man is. So let's maybe just get an answer from each of you. If you had 1 minute to define biblical Christian masculinity, what would you say? Who wants to be a man and take the lead and go first?
I thought being a man was putting yourself last. Isn't that right?
Oh, that's well played. Well
Joe,
played.
you can go first because you spoke first.
Well, I think Genesis 4 is about the best place to go, because what you see is you see this genealogy of men doing all the things that have defined manliness culturally. So you have guys building cities. You have guys that are defining themselves by their accomplishments. They're building stuff, becoming craftsmen. You've got guys doing sexual exploits, accumulating wives, and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden you get down to a guy named Enosh, and that's where men begin to call on the name of the Lord. And, as a man, there is that leadership role, but really, I think more fundamentally than anything else, what we're doing is leading people to God. And it's that God direction that we're heading in our own life. And just as Enoch, it wasn't just himself, that was for the sake of his family, that was countercultural. And I think at its very root, that idea of being a covenant servant, being defined by your worship and leading other people in that direction. I think that gets, for me, to the very root of what it means.
Yeah, well done. That's less than a minute as well. So I'm impressed with that. That's a good way to start. Kent, do you want to go next? Same question.
Bonus points to Joe for the sub-minute response. Well done, Joe. And like Joe referenced Enosh, I would just reference Jesus himself. I think that what we find is we find all kinds of models of masculinity, and you got to do these things in this order. And here's the diagram, the chart, the graph, all the requirements. And in the end, it comes down to, am I behaving like Jesus behaved? And are my priorities like his priorities? Do I love people and those kind of things? And we'll talk more about this as we go, but I think that's the right starting point for most guys, is to dispel the modern culture definitions of manhood and all the models. And we've all got our own, kind of priority list, and just go right back to first century and say, man, Jesus was, as my friend Dan Spader says, Jesus was man as man was intended to be. And so for me, that's a great model.
Yeah, cheers, Kent. Gav, what do you want to
pick? And echoing what the guys have said there, and I guess we'll talk about Jesus in a moment. But maybe I'd just preface my definition with saying, lots of people say, what is it to be a man of God? And many answer to be good and kind and generous and joyful. And these are just generic Christian. But what is it to be a man and not a woman? What's the difference? And so I'd have a couple of creation observations and say that manliness and womanliness flows from being made a man or a woman. To put it maybe another way, is how a man thinks and acts proceeds from who they are, constituted by God as male and not female. So in Genesis 1:27, we see that God created the man and the woman in his image, male and female, right? The next line, he says, be fruitful and multiply. So you've got that equality of image. The next line is, make babies. And then obviously that includes being married, which is expanded on in Genesis 2, where you have these complementary male and female functions in a sexual union, flowing from their created sex. And so I think as it unpacks in Genesis 1 and 2, and you could spend, half an hour just unpacking the manhood from that, is that God, this would be my definition, God constituted the man to act out his manliness. Therefore, that means exercising benevolent, sacrificial dominion in your designated sphere of influence in order to bear fruit for the good of others. And within those spheres of influence, manliness would involve spiritual and physical leadership, which it looks like protection and provision for those in your care, and particularly towards women and children, especially then for a wife. That would be my final definition, which I would get from Genesis 1 and 2, and which is fulfilled obviously in Christ, as we'll speak about.